So in this video, I'm going to share 4 different strategies or routes that people take in order to become a millionaire. And between these 4 different ideas or strategies that you can implement, they make up about 99% of all millionaires today. So most millionaires are taking one of these different strategies, one of these different routes to reach that $1 million mark. So hopefully you can find some value in this video. If you do, make sure you subscribe, drop a like, and let's just get started with this. But what I'm also going to do in this video is share some of my ideas behind this, some ways that I'm working towards these goals, but also, if you do want to actually become a millionaire, you want to potentially set that goal higher than just $1 million, based off the fact that good old Uncle Sam's probably going to take about half of the money that you make. So you might want to set that for closer to $2 million if you want to become a millionaire. There's certainly a difference between becoming a millionaire and making $1 million, because you can make $1 million, but your net worth might still only be $500,000 or $600,000, depending on what state you live in and whatnot. But so you want to set that goal a little bit higher. But let's talk about these 4 different routes that you could potentially take in order to become a millionaire. And the first one, we're just going to touch on it ever so slightly, but I think it's actually quite important, and that's actually inheriting money. Now, if you're watching this video, you might not be a trust fund baby. I'm not a trust fund baby, so we're in the same boat here, but that's okay. What I want to prove here, this point that I want to prove, and the reason why we're mentioning this is because contrary to what popular belief is, that most millionaires have inherited their money, or most billionaires have inherited their money. If you actually look at the numbers, you look at the statistics, Chris Hogan ran a study on this, interviewed about 10,000 different millionaires, found that only about 21% of them actually inherited any money whatsoever. So a lot of millionaires are self-made, a good amount of them are self-made, and that goes for billionaires as well. I believe it was a study that found about 60-some% of billionaires are considered self-made. So because of that, look, there's a lot of room for people to build wealth over their lifetime. You don't have to be born with a silver spoon in your mouth in order to reach that $1 million status, or reach even that $1 billion status. Now, it's much more difficult. It's definitely a setback when you're born with $0. Actually, I think I got a $50 bond from my uncle when I was born, so I don't know if that counts as inheriting wealth. But either way, most of us didn't have that silver spoon in our mouths when we were born. So if you're in that boat, it's okay. And most people are actually not inheriting that money to get to that $1 million mark. So let's talk about the 3 ways, the real 3 ways that you can actually get to this $1 million mark. And the first one, and I believe this is really the fastest way to do this. See, between these 3, one of them is arguably the fastest way. The second one I'm going to share with you is something that might take some time to build up, might take a decade, might take 2 decades, but is definitely something that could be worth the while. And then the third one is one that is probably the most surefire, most likely, most probable way for you to become a millionaire. So all 3 of these right now. But the first one is by building a business. See, this is how people go from $0 to $1 billion. This is how people go from 0 to $100 billion. It's by building a business. And there's really no faster way to actually become a millionaire than doing this. Now, you could certainly invest in the stock market. You could certainly do various other types of investments, or maybe real estate, and you can build wealth certainly over time with those different things. But building your own business, if you simply just look at the charts and look at the richest people in the world and how they actually got there, most of them started their own company, started their own business, and grew it to that $1 billion mark or higher. And so if you want to grow as fast as possible, we're talking potentially a couple of months, we're talking a couple of years potentially. Now, the downside of this is that it's not as probable as some of these other ones I'm going to share with you in this list. And that certainly is a downside, but I think it really does have so much upside to it. So, some people have been messaging me or leaving comments or emailing or DMing me on Instagram asking, maybe they're a teenager, they want to make some money, they want to build some wealth and increase their wealth. And they ask, what's the best option? Should they invest in stocks? Should they get into like some other type of investments? How do they start? And what I would like to say, and sometimes I just don't get the time to respond to everybody individually on an individual case-by-case situation, because it just takes a lot of time. I hope you understand that. So if you've sent me a message and I haven't responded, I've probably read it but just haven't had the time to respond, and I apologize for that. But look, if you're in a position where maybe you don't have a lot of money, maybe you have only $100 or $200 to spare, and you want to find a way to increase your income or build wealth, I think the best strategy, I really do believe this, is to start your own business. And look, you don't have to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. You don't have to start Snapchat or create your own MySpace or Facebook. You don't have to go huge like that, right? you can create a simple cash business like a lawn care business. I've talked about it so many times, but this is what I did when I was a teenager, and it worked out very well to just get from maybe a couple $100s to $20, $30, or $40,000, at which point then it could make more sense to maybe look into real estate, maybe look into investing in the stock market. But I'll give you a primary reason for why you want to start a business or something that can really generate a lot of cash up front when you're younger, when you're starting with a smaller amount of money. See, if you try to build wealth and become a millionaire starting with $100, now if you go the business route, you have potential of huge upside with very little potential of losing, because the most you're going to lose is $100 if you start your business with $100. But imagine if you took this $100 and put it into, say, the stock market, and you could get, say, a 10% return. Maybe you could get a 15% return per year, average that because you're a stock market wizard, you're very smart, and you can net a 15% annual return on that money. Well, after a year of investing $100, you're going to have made probably about $15. That's barely enough to buy a couple Big Macs at McDonald's. So you see the problem there, where when you're starting with a smaller amount of money, it's hard to actually invest that. You can't buy a house with $100. You can only buy a couple shares of stock, potentially, maybe not even one share of stock with $100. And so because of that, it's hard to actually grow, because percentage-wise, it could be nice, but the actual amount of money that you're gaining on those investments, those small investments, it's just not really worth it, in my opinion. And that's why, if you've been watching this channel for some time, you've probably noticed how I've really talked about the stock market a lot in the past, especially last year, about 18 months ago, leading up to maybe a few months ago. I've really been discussing the stock market a lot, but I kind of veered off from that a little bit to talk a little bit more about business ideas and business ventures that people can take on, because I think it really is the best way for people to start when you're really starting with nothing. So that's the first one there, and I really do think that's the best option for people to go from $0 to $1 million in a matter of years potentially. But it's really all what you put into it. Now, there's two more here, and they are very much different from starting your own business, because not everybody wants to start their own business, and that's okay. You don't have to. There's still some other ways that you can become a millionaire. So the next one is quite interesting. It's by mastering your craft. So what I mean by this is to further your education so that you can move yourself up in the business or corporation that you might be working in at the moment. See, if you look at the actual cost of college and you think, well, that's a lot of money, and you maybe think about going to graduate school or getting an MBA, you want to really look into the hard facts there and the numbers. But what you might find is that it's still actually very worth it to go to college and to get something like an MBA. The average MBA person who graduates with an MBA will see a massive increase in their salary. I believe the average salary is about $145,000 or more for people who have an MBA. So I really do think that this could be a great strategy for really increasing your income very drastically and rather quickly, especially once you get past those first few years. That's why the average CEO of a large corporation is making about $15 million per year. Now, it's certainly a lot of tasks that you have to bring on, but if you can work your way up through the system, you can certainly see a very large pay increase without having to start your own business, but just working your way up through the ranks in a corporation. So, if you're starting off as a janitor somewhere and you want to work your way up to CEO, it's certainly possible without schooling, but if you really want to be making millions of dollars per year, you might want to consider somehow finding a way to reinvest the money that you're making and put it into an education, a formal education, to work your way up through the ranks. It's hard to do that as someone who maybe dropped out of college and trying to work your way up through the ranks in a corporation that's already very well established. It's going to be a little bit difficult, so getting that formal education, if that's the route that you want to do to climb the corporate ladder, it certainly is something that's available to people and something that you may want to consider exploring. But a lot of that is self-explanatory, so we don't have to get too into detail with that. And the final one here is kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier when I mentioned some types of investments. This is when you want to consider, actually investing money. And this is the most probable, the most likely way for people to become millionaire. This is how the majority of millionaires are made, through their own investments. Maybe this is real estate, maybe this is the stock market, maybe this is some other type of investment, maybe cryptocurrency, whatever you can do well with, then that certainly could be your other route that you could take. But my strategy, the way that I've been implementing this, so when I was younger, I was very much into the stock market, and I still do put a lot of money into the markets, but the different route that I've been taking a little bit more is actually the money that I'm making, I'm investing it into businesses, I'm investing into my own business, and working towards growing it, because I think I personally have more control over it, but also the ability or at least I believe, I have the ability to grow my investment by putting it into myself faster than what the average stock market might grow at about maybe 7 to 10% per year. So by doing that, that's my strategy. Now, once you get enough money, it makes a lot more sense to throw more money into mutual funds, throw more money into stocks and various other types of investments like bonds or CDs or anything else that you could think about. But the reason why I'm not going all in on those at the moment is because when you just look at the numbers here, look, let's say that you have $100, like we mentioned earlier, you have $100. Now you could put this $100 into a business, or you could put it into an investment, say the S&P 500, right? Now when you're starting with such a small amount of money, look, if you make 10% on that through an investment, you're going to get $10 at the end of the year, right? And then maybe the year after that, you'll get close to $11 at the end of that year, right? But if you put it into a business and you can quadruple that, you can multiply, you can 10x it, you can multiply it by 100 on 2 or 3 years in a row. That's when you can consider taking that money and then putting it into stocks. Because if you can make 10% on $1 million, that's $100 grand, that's $100,000. But 10% on $100, it's only $10. Like I said, you can buy like 2.5 Big Macs for that price. So that's my strategy. I'm going to put more money into the markets as I gain more money, because it just makes more sense from that standpoint. That's why Warren Buffett can make billions of dollars per year by investing into very basic index funds if you would like to. So hopefully you can see the different routes there. There's really those 4 routes, but really if you're not inheriting money, there's 3 routes for becoming a millionaire, and all 3 of them have different ways that you can go about them. But that's my strategy. That's what I've been doing. So if you found any value in this video, thanks for watching. As always, thanks for supporting the channel. I really do appreciate everything. So thank you, and I'll see everybody next time.